Halloween is finally here. Halloween is finally here. How do you guys like my outfit this year? I'm going as a gamer. To be completely honest, I've never really been the biggest fan of the spooky times, but I do gaming videos on the internet. It's time to do the cliche Halloween celebration special. Time to talk about Luigi's Mansion. I know it's pretty cliche, but whenever I think about gaming on Halloween, Luigi's Mansion always comes to mind. I got this game back on Christmas 2001 with my GameCube and Super Smash Bros. Melee, and this stupid, dumb baby was too spooked by the spookiness that was spooking Luigi, so I just played Melee endlessly instead. The most I got out of this game for a while was, ooh, that Pikmin game looks pretty neat. But it didn't take long for me to finally see what this game was all about, and boy oh boy, having a game like this for a new console's launch was certainly a bold move, but it's a damn good time. Can we really say that Nintendo launched a system with the Mario game if the hat and shirt were colored green instead? Choosing Luigi as the star character, that was definitely an interesting choice. Sure, now Luigi has a ton of love and his fear of ghosts may be his defining character trait, but back in 2001, he kinda was just Green Mario, sometimes literally. The definition of player 2. He did write about his ghost fear and wanting to star in his very own adventure back in his diary in Paper Mario, but that was earlier in the same year, so it was more of a cute little wink and nudge than anything. But his name would have to be in the title of this one, huh? Yeah, okay, let's just go ahead and forget about that other game that he starred in. Nobody will really mind. Luigi's Mansion started off as a bit of a tech demo for Nintendo's newest hardware, a way to show off the raw power of the purple lunchbox, all the while showing off a familiar character in a brand new environment. And boy, did it ever send shockwaves throughout the gaming community.
The lighting, oh my god.
I was thinking the same thing. Not much more to do here than to just pop the disc in and take on one more trip to the mansion. Ah, it's good to be home. The game wastes no time at all, showing Luigi walking off towards a spooky mansion that he actually won in a contest that he didn't enter. You know, he could have just looked into it since it sounds very suspicious, but I guess Luigi's been on the sidelines for so long. He was just bored and wanted something to do. I love this first shot too. It's an angle of the mansion that you never get to see again. We then cut to the rest of the lobby. This is very much unlike anything we've seen in this franchise before. Muted colors, all we can hear are Luigi's footsteps, only to soon spot a creepy figure holding a key with sudden and intense music playing as it makes its escape. Even the jingle that plays after you get an item is super unique. I've always been a big fan. Luigi then runs into that ghost, only to encounter an old man with a vacuum cleaner, attempting and failing to capture it. This is Professor Elvin Gadd, or EGAD for short. He brings Green Mario off to safety and gives him the rundown. He mentions that the mansion only just popped up a few days ago, it's filled with ghosts, and he did actually see Mario run in, but he hasn't seen him since. Well, that's no good. It's time to save our brother. For the first time, that one game didn't happen. Hey, did you know that if you wait on the control screen for 3.5 minutes, the popular musical Easter egg Totaka's song plays? This is a track that's in a bunch of Nintendo games, from Yoshi's Story, Mario Paint, to Link's Awakening, even the Switch port. Pretty neat. But with our new vacuum, the Poltergust, in tow, it's time to return to the spooky mansion and do some ghost busting. We're totally not ripping off Ghostbusters, we promise. Am I the only one who was genuinely a little creeped out when the painting started talking to you? Granted, like I said, I was a dumb, stupid baby, but I was just starting to make peace with the fact that I was gonna be dealing with ghosts. I didn't need to see this too. You go from room to room, clear it of all the ghostly blobs, yell for Mario a couple times because that's gonna do something. Wait for the lights to turn on to let you know that that room is safe, and then you move on to the next one, usually thanks to a key that you receive, also letting you know where to progress to next. As much as this game looks like a sort of open world, one where you can explore the mansion at your own free will, something more similar to, say, the Spencer Mansion in Resident Evil, this is actually a pretty linear experience. The Resident Evil comparisons are abundant too. Look at these door transitions, I'm telling you, Crimson Head's got nothing on the banana peel tossing ghosts. Soon after the adventure begins, we're brought to a dark room with no standard colored ghosts, but a more human-shaped one. You encounter a bunch of these within the mansion's halls, and each one is a sort of mini-puzzle within itself. With the normal ghosts, you just gotta wait for the right time, scare it to death, or it's already dead, so I don't know, you just scare it, and then its heart pops up, and then you're able to suck it away. And I really like these enemies too. They're goofy looking for sure, but they always seem out to get you. They're not just a bunch of pranksters just goofing around before you show up to spoil the party. Psst. You're gonna wanna remember that bullet point. Most of them follow that pretty basic formula, but there are a few instances where trying to shine them with your flashlight actually takes a bit of thought. I wish it happened more than it did. There's only like 2 rooms where you'll find enemies that go like this, but when it does happen, they're really cool encounters. But for these special ones, known as portrait ghosts, since they used to reside within portraits before being released, getting their heart to show is a bit more complicated. Scanning it with your Game Boy Horror, which I love this thing, by the way, usually gives you a clue on how to do so, or simple trial and error can get the job done too. For the most part, it usually takes only one simple action based on your surroundings to expose their heart. Shivers, though, he was the only one that never really made a ton of sense to me. I mean, he's scared of fire, and when you light up his lantern, he gets scared, floats away, and holds on to that lit lantern the entire time. He's not really the brightest ghost, methinks. The ways to get through these apparitions is far from clever, but it certainly keeps things interesting, especially with Madame Clairvoya, a ghost that actually assists you by giving you fortunes after providing her pieces of Mario's clothing hidden throughout the mansion. You see, Mario tends to only wear one single outfit, but he did pack with him a spare hat, a single glove, a single shoe, a letter, and a star. That's it. And getting the star is one of the mansion's strongest moments. You take a look at the moon through this telescope here, and it basically transports you to space. And one properly aimed shot of the moon to blow it up opens up a pathway to the item we need. Sonic Adventure 2 released in the same year and also saw the moon getting blown up. The year prior we had Majora's Mask, and we all know how that went. What was with the early 2000s and everyone hating moons? As for the ghost capturing process itself, oh boy, have you ever captured a ghost before? Roughing up the analog stick in the opposite direction in such a way that lets you suck up as much health from it as possible, as well as avoiding any obstacles the room throws at you. Oh man, few things in life are as satisfying as this. Busting ghosts in Luigi's Mansion just feels good. Like, thanks to the controller's analog triggers, you push them down a little bit to suck or blow lightly, and then you give it a click, bam! And everything comes together when you tackle the 4 main bosses. We got unique, creepy looking arenas, and wildly different attack patterns than what the rest of the portrait ghosts throw at you. Chauncey the Big Baby is a great first boss encounter. Bouncy balls and rocking horses as attacks? Nothing else could be more terrifying. And it's important to get good at capturing too. This isn't really the case with the bosses, but for the rest of them, you get rewarded with pearls by whittling down their health. And you get more and bigger ones the better you perform. Getting a bunch of money is a big part of this game's replayability, and perfecting the capturing process so you can get some gold picture frames for them is crucial to get that money. Some of them are even optional too, but come on, just go and get all of them. I honestly always forget that I can beat this game without getting some of these. I can't run by Biff Atlas and not physically assault him. I ain't no wimp here, of course I'm gonna do it. The portrait ghosts are arguably Luigi's Mansion's highest defining trait. They walk or float that fine line between the wackiness of the typical Mario series with the darker and creepier vibe of Luigi's Mansion. They're pretty cool. And speaking of the Mario series, booze! Partway into the adventure, Luigi presses a button that he probably shouldn't have, releasing a whopping 50 boos into the mansion, as well as their leader, King Boo. And throughout your adventure to save Mario, after a room has been cleared of the spooky new ghosts, a boo will find its way in one of the room's objects. You just sort of shake everything up a bunch in a very weird way that only Luigi can do.
Oh yeah.
And then it could be a fake, it could be a bomb or a boo ball, but sometimes an actual boo will pop up. And I don't know, man, this is fine, but it's nowhere near as fun as capturing the other ghosts. The boos have no resistance, so you kind of just hold the suck button and hope for the best. And later on, when they start having 100, 200, 300 health, and if they go through a wall, it ends up being a tedious slog to just walk to the other room and get them, and heaven forbid that there's no easy way to get to that new room, then it just becomes a total grind. It's not a tough quest to complete, just a bit annoying at times. But hey, at least they all have cute names. Bamboo, Boodacious, Mr. Boojangles, Game Boo Advance. That's fun. You're bound to find a bunch of them from exploration anyway. There are a few extra things that you can do to get as much money as possible, like finding a couple hidden rooms or special money ghosts, so finding some booze along the way doesn't feel like too much of a hassle. It also ends up feeling like a way to get you to memorize the design of the mansion, so you can get anywhere you want to without having to constantly check the map. The kitchen leading into the backyard, the elevator leading you to the roof, and then the chimney that drops you back down into a brand new room. There's the billiard room that's just sitting there teasing you for a while since you run past it multiple times before being able to go into it for yourself. The mansion is just so well designed, and the iconic theme song that goes along with it, oh man, it's so good. And Luigi humming the theme song to himself so he's not as scared as he would be otherwise, it is a fantastic touch. And then, of course, we have King Boo. What a perfect antagonist for Luigi. Bigger forms of existing Mario enemies has been a thing for a long time. It's really common. But his sunken eye sockets and the magenta pupils, the blue tongue, his design is just perfect. That other King Boo that just looks like a normal Boo with a crown? Yeah, no, that's not him. This is my king. I love the tease roughly halfway through the game too. Getting just a glimpse of the final threat in this secret room, it got me really excited to get into that room proper. And once we finally make it to the basement with enough booze captured, it's time to, well, check for a few more gems first. Sorry bro, just give me a second here, I gotta make as much bank as I can. King Boo has one final trick up his sleeve to capture us and put a Luigi portrait up next to the Mario one. Bowser. Well, more specifically, a Bowser doll. The game doesn't really clarify that it's a Bowser doll when you first encounter it, so younger me, when Bowser's head flew off, I gotta tell ya, I really enjoyed sleeping up until that moment. I couldn't do that peacefully for a little while. This is such a cool fight though. It's not tough by any means, but I loved the aesthetic of being on the roof with this almost fiery bubble surrounding us. It made this fight feel a bit more intense, unlike the muted tone of the rest of the game. Eventually, King Boo is captured, just like the rest of them, and with nothing else in our way, we can finally bring Mario home. The king would then go on to technically show up in Super Mario Sunshine, and every now and then I just remember that this is a thing, and I wish I hadn't. All we gotta do here is use the portrification device that we've already been using, but in reverse. And with that, Mario is saved. The credits roll with one of the funkiest beats to ever be in a Nintendo game, and based on the amount of money that you earn, you finally get a mansion to call your own. Hey, look at that, I'm pretty good at this game. It's not really that long of an adventure. It only takes a few hours to go from start to finish and collect a ton of treasure along the way, but trying to go for as much money as possible, or an even bigger challenge, go for as little money as possible, makes this game highly replayable. There is the new Hidden Mansion, a sort of new game plus, but all that's different is the enemies deal twice as much damage and your poltergust is more powerful. It's not really different enough to make it a worthwhile playthrough in my opinion. It's just kinda satisfying being able to suck away enemies' life super quickly. Besides, it turns out that Europe and Australia's Hidden Mansion mode got a lot more changes to make it a really fun second quest. Good on you guys, but as an American, that's pretty lame. Well, that's where the 3DS version comes in, releasing to such critical acclaim such as, why is it not on the Switch? The original game found its way onto Nintendo's handheld with a bunch of small changes. Firstly, I think this new version looks a lot better, like Luigi looks normal now. That's nice. This includes his crying animation during the ending. Always thought it looked really weird in the original. Bowser's lost a bit of weight, I'm proud of him. King Boo looks way more sinister here, and the ghosts may not be as transparent, we are on weaker hardware here, but on the whole, I definitely think this looks superior, even though it's at a lower resolution. It's kinda like the DS version of Super Mario 64. We got a lot of graphical upgrades on a console that inherently looks worse. EGAD's Gallery was a nice portrait showcase on the GameCube, but now it also acts as a way to re-fight bosses and better your strategies instead of needing to play the entire game over from the beginning. The controls are a big difference here, especially on the original 3DS. The right analog stick on either the new 3DS or the Circle Pad Pro kinda imitates the precise aiming of the C-stick, but the most efficient way to do it is with a bit of motion controls. It's not ideal, but hey, it works. Kinda. There's also a brand new flashlight mode with the strobe bulb, a feature that was introduced in the sequel, probably implemented to offset the arguably more crippled controls, but after so many playthroughs of the original game, I was actually welcome to this new style. And hey, it's still an option, so if you want the purest experience that you can get on the 3DS, that's still there for you. Also, we now get to see the bottom half of the Game Boy Horror. Finally! There's also no Pikmin trailer. As sad as that is, it was to be expected. I was kind of hoping for a Hey Pikmin trailer to be thrown in to compensate, even though the game was already released at the time. It would have just been a cute little throwback. But for the most part, it's the same adventure, just now in a handheld, and as such, I don't know, man, I think this may be my preferred version of this game. I don't need the map on the screen at all times, but hey, it's convenient. There are achievements now. I mean, why not? The game is already pretty replayable. Multiplayer was added too, and oh god, please don't ever play the game this way. To be fair, the world was introduced to Luigi here, which, cool, but please don't think about taking Luigi and Green Luigi out on the field at the same time. It runs really poorly. I don't know how they thought this was a good selling point. Even in the trailer, the frame rate's bad. And then there's the brand new Hidden Mansion, this time with a bunch of changes in every region. There are more poison mushrooms that pop up to hamper your progress, more powerful ghosts appear way earlier than normal, bosses are a lot more difficult with modified attack patterns. This is what I'm talking about. This is what I want out of an enhanced port, especially if it's of a 10-plus-year-old game. Worthwhile new content. Remember when they kinda just added a floating JPEG to Kirby's Epic Yarn, called it a hard mode, and then shipped it? Boy, how exciting. Luigi's Mansion is still a classic after all these years. Now I know the purists are gonna live and die by the GameCube version, but hey, if my recommendation means anything to you, definitely give the 3DS version a shot as well. I was a big fan of what they did here. And if anything, once again, you gotta commend Nintendo for launching a brand new console with a game like this. The GameCube had a lot of experimental titles going on, and it started off with a major one. I'm sure it worked out really well for them. Oh wow, it really is Halloween after all. Those numbers are terrifying. So I know Halloween's all done with, but that didn't really stop Nintendo from releasing Luigi's Mansion 3 on Halloween, meaning most people were playing the game in November instead of October, the spooky month of the year where the game is thematically appropriate. Thanks a lot for that one, Nintendo. I really appreciate it. I'm still playing the game, I promise. That video's coming out next. So, what do we do until then? Well, we took a look at Luigi's Mansion 1 last time. Only makes sense to take a look at Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon, the sequel. Oh, there it is. Happy late Halloween, everybody. Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon. This was actually known as Luigi's Mansion 2 early in development, and it even maintained that name outside of North America. And I gotta say, thank goodness, us Americans are terrified of numbers. Except for the number 3. That one's okay, apparently. Luigi's Mansion getting a sequel out of nowhere was certainly a surprise. The original would go on to sell well, review well, and elements of it made cameos in other games. Like Luigi finally had some defining character traits. That's more than we can say for Mario. His water gun in Sunshine that was conveniently also built by EGAD had a stronger personality than he did. But Nintendo was going in hard with the big titles for their brand new 3DS handheld. So at E3 2011, with one of the coolest things Nintendo's ever done with a dozen oddly shaped monitors, a new Luigi's Mansion was born. And this time, development was handed over to Next Level Games, the company responsible for the Punch-Out reboot, Super Mario Strikers, one of the best Mario sports games ever made, and how can we possibly forget about Ticket to Ride on the Xbox 360? That was a classic. I've only played through this game once before, back in 2013 when it was brand new. Clearly, I haven't been compelled to play it again since then, even though I've played the original game on both GameCube and 3DS at least a dozen times. I adore that game to bits, but for whatever reason, clearly, once was enough for me, so after all these years later, I am very excited to take another trip to Luigi's Mansion 2. I mean Dark Moon. I mean, come on, Nintendo. Luigi's Mansion 2, Dark Moon would have been totally fine instead of splitting up the title across multiple regions. That's very, very weird. The adventure this time takes place in Evershade Valley. We drop in on Professor Egad doing some more research with his crew of friendly green ghosts, and everything seems just dandy. But then we see a King Boo-shaped silhouette in the sky break the Dark Moon into pieces, scattering them across the valley, and turning the once friendly ghosts aggressive. And, well, since Luigi handled the ghosts last time, he gets called upon to tackle some ghosts once again, getting ripped right from his home via his television. That's pretty good technology. And see, that's what you get for wasting energy leaving the TV on like that. That's foolish. Well, our goal's pretty clear. Find the pieces of the Dark Moon and take care of any spectral baddies that float in your way. Oh, and Mario got kidnapped once again too. Of course he did. You're losing your edge there, Mr. Jumpman. Also, can I say, some of the animations here just feel unfinished? Sometimes a character does a thing and then they just stop moving. And now we go on to the portion of today's show where I try to do the cliche YouTuber thing and reenact the weird part of a video game that I just talked about. Hope it makes you laugh. The big change this time around is rather than having one mansion to explore every nook and cranny of, now we have 5 different mansions, each one with their own unique themes and gimmicks, and regular instances of being pulled out by Egad since the adventure is now mission-based. I think this was done to push the portable gaming idea of playing a game in short sessions instead of long ones, but it doesn't make sense for this type of game in my opinion. When you're thrown into a mansion, you still have access to a good chunk of it, and there are benefits to exploration, such as hidden gems and bonus rooms, but being locked out of progression until you deal with some dialogue boxes and menus just doesn't feel natural, since you'll often jump right back into where you left off anyway, and it's not like the game isn't afraid to tell you to do some backtracking. It's no knock on the actual content of the game itself, but I'm not a fan of how this adventure is structured. Oh, and Egad also calls you like every 5 minutes. It's terrible. Listen, alright, I get it. It's a very, very catchy ringtone. We're using the dual scream now instead of the Game Boy Horror, which is a hardware leap that I can approve of, but it's pretty annoying. Once we jump into that first mission though, oh, it does feel good to be doing this again. Walking around these dark and unknown environments, grabbing our trusted and upgraded ghost vacuum, the Poltergust 5000, and doing some good old-fashioned ghost busting, it feels really good. We're still not ripping off Ghostbusters, we swear. While each mission does technically have an original objective, everything you do boils down to going to a point specified on the map and sucking up anything that you run across. Especially when a lot of the missions boil down to go into this door. Oh wait, now you can't because they took the thing, go and find the thing. That happens a lot, and it does feel like padding at times, but at least the act of going and getting the thing is pretty consistent. There are a lot more puzzles this time too, usually of the environmental variety, which is really nice, but otherwise, it's a pretty simple setup. To help you out along your adventure, some changes have been made to the whole ghost capturing process. Aiming can now be done with the face buttons. You press X to look up and B to look down, which feels really nice. And to deal with crowds of ghosts, you now have access to the strobe bulb, a chargeable flash of light that does a much better job than just turning a flashlight off and then on real quick. And once you have a ghost, pulling them back now fills up this special meter that when filled up, you can do an extra powerful pull to take a bigger chunk out of their health. I really like this. The whole struggle that you have with the ghosts is half of the fun of the entire game, so having that extra incentive to not only suck them in, but to do it well, is pretty satisfying. The new dark light mechanic opens up some puzzle opportunities as well. It's pretty obvious when you need to use it, but the sound design behind it makes it a fairly gratifying item to use. Admittedly, I do still miss the elemental spirits from the first game. They were pretty nice. Regarding the types of ghosts that you tackle, they're handled pretty differently. Just from a design perspective, I'm not really a fan. They just come off as a whole lot more comedic, and I think the more sinister approach of the ghosts from the first game made them a more immediate threat. I mean, the common green ones just kinda giggle most of the time, and it really just takes me out of the whole idea of, oh no, spooky ghosts. There was also this one that was in the middle of using the toilet before Luigi comes in and ruins its day. I mean, yeah, I would be pretty mad too. too, but when it comes time to actually battle them, this was handled really well. Yeah, they are still pretty simple, and on the surface, you mainly only have 4 different types to go against, but the basic green ones will sometimes bring in weapons or have an extra bit of protection before being able to hit them with your light. And when you're thrown into a room filled with ghosts, which happens a lot, it's as fun as ever to take them all down as best as you can. There's also no equivalent to the portrait ghosts. That's a major blow. The standard ones don't really have all that much personality, and when they do get a chance to show it off, it's just, haha, we're just a bunch of goofs. But that would have been fine if there were more intimidating ones to go for that had some character, and there's just nothing here. There is this one special battle against this trio, the Three Sisters, but it's the only fight of its kind. They don't even have that much of a personality, it's just a mini-boss that pops up in a cemetery. But why isn't there more of this stuff? But what about the main bosses? Every single mansion has one final challenge before you move on to the next one, and they're not that great either. The first boss against the spider is really cool since it's one long puzzle using fire, but the others, you wait for the right moment and suck away. Where did the innovation go? One of the bosses is legit just an enemy gauntlet. There's a sort of callback to the Boolossus fight, which is kinda neat, but that's about it. And the chili ride fight. This is absolutely the worst. How did they let this happen? You gotta like aim these cannonballs to hit every part of this ice face, but there's always gonna be one panel that's near impossible to hit, and then oh look at that, all the panels came back. Oh hey, look at that. I hate it. It's not even like the ghosts behind these battles are interesting. They all end up just being the same weird looking spooky boys with like, oh, this one has 2 horns on it. Cool. But you catch them the same way every time. We're approaching a Paper Mario Sticker Star level of character variety now. It's not a good thing. These big brain guys are like the next best thing, but they yell nyak nyak, so I don't know, I think that kind of disqualifies them from being a threat. They sound like Jabberjaw. It is ultimately a matter of preference on how big of a deal the lack of a portrait ghost equivalent leaves on the game as a whole, but when the standard enemies are less of a threat and there's no bigger threat in sight, it just reduces the tension to an incredibly low level. And we already know King Boo is at the end of the game. He's literally one of the first things we see. Yeah, the dark lighting ain't fooling me on this one. He shows up in the background of a few scenes later on, which is kinda cool, but the surprise was gone a long time ago. It sometimes feels like I'm just completing this game for the sake of it, rather than trying to overcome any challenges that are thrown my way. That being said though, Dark Moon does do some really cool things, and some things I would say are better than the original. If Luigi's Mansion helped launch Luigi's personality, Dark Moon goes above and beyond to make sure that this green Mario brother is an absolute lovable goofball. I'm not the only one going along for the ride for the sake of it. Luigi clearly is too. There are cutscenes abound with a ton of minor voice acting. And like in every single one, he's presented as this big dumb idiot who has no idea what he's doing. And it's incredible. Honestly, this is where a good chunk of the fun in this adventure was had, just getting to see what Luigi was gonna do next. And they included a dog, Polterpup. This game is absolutely in my good graces now. Add an adorable dog into anything, and it immediately goes up like a good 3 points. And on top of that, the boos return. But instead of just being a thing to collect, there's only one per mission, and they're pretty well hidden. Capturing them ends up feeling like more of a reward, especially since now you pull them by the tongue and then they bounce all across the room. I love it every single time. Getting all of them for a single mansion also unlocks an extra time-based challenge to tackle. It's not much, but hey, at least it's something. And then we have the returning Toads, this time acting like more of an escort mission instead of just being crybabies like the first game. And I really liked these too. Sometimes you get to inhale the Toad and then shoot it across a gap, which is a game mechanic that I can't believe I said out loud. Sometimes they are absolute idiots, but they do more good than not. And even if this game loses a lot of the charm and atmosphere, I really like the idea of going through multiple themed mansions. There's a buried clock tower, a mining area on top of a snowy mountain, a haunted botanical garden. It's really cool. and the theming really does lend itself to some cool puzzles when you're not too occupied busting some ghosts. The music is alright, nowhere near as iconic as the first game's theme, but it gets the job done in my opinion. You also can't scream Mario's name at the push of a button.
Yo-ho.
This game is inching back closer to a 0 out of 10. And then, well, we all saw this coming. After we retrieve all of the pieces of the Dark Moon, we get intercepted on our trip back to EGAD's lab and land in King Boo's illusion, where, making his grand reveal, King Boo. Now, seeking revenge for the events of the first game, this king takes advantage of the now frenzied ghosts to become ruler of the world. But listen, buddy, we have a vacuum, alright? Nothing can possibly stop me. It's a pretty alright final battle. You gotta use his fear of light to leave him under the spiked balls that he himself shoots up into the air, and then you do a chase segment in a little side-scrolling area, something awfully reminiscent of Miss Pac-Man Maze Madness, something I never thought I would say, and then you do that a few times, you try to suck him in with the poltergust every now and then when you have the chance, and in no time, he's back to being captured where he belongs. As I said, not much of a last battle. I think he did a better job in the first game, but oh man, does the ending ever make up for it. Luigi manages to pull Mario out of the portrait that he's trapped in thanks to his dark light, and once the Dark Moon has been restored to its original form, all of the ghosts become good again, and they regain their pupils. That was the true sign of not being evil all along. Just getting to see Mario and Luigi being so happy, like they're finally celebrating all of the work that Luigi put into getting into this ending. It's so heartwarming.
Thanks, my bro. Thanks, Mario.
Oh, that was just the most precious thing I've ever seen. And the last thing we see is Polterpup going to sleep in Luigi's lap. This is one of the greatest things I've ever seen. Nothing negative I've said about this game matters anymore. Well, before we wrap things up, I guess there is the multiplayer mode to talk about as well, the Scare Scraper, where up to 4 players take in the role of Green Luigi, Orange Luigi, Blue Luigi, and Pink Luigi work together to traverse a series of rooms in a variety of timed-based modes, like capturing every ghost, trying to find the floor's exit, and catching a bunch of Polterpups. It's a pretty enjoyable time. You know, I wouldn't say Luigi's Mansion is the type of game that needed multiplayer, especially since they had to just pull up a bunch of skins for Luigi and call it a day, but it's still fun enough if you ever get the chance to experience it. It can also be played online, so back when this game was new, it definitely added some replay value. Luigi's Mansion 2: Dark Moon is a really fun sequel, even though it's not the most faithful one. What it does do, it does pretty well, even though it goes against what the original game did so well all those years prior. The mission approach isn't ideal, and a lot of the charm is gone, but it's still a lot of fun. And honestly, the game is worth playing just to watch Luigi do things. I would pay $30 for that alone. And actually, the game was good enough to have an arcade version. I found a machine at a local Dave & Buster's, and I had a really good time with this. It's basically a 2-player on-rails game where you hold your very own poltergust to bust some ghosts on your own, and the theming of the game is obviously based on Dark Moon. Seeing a lot of this game in high definition, in angles that you don't get to see in the main game itself, it's pretty cool. If you ever stumble across one of these arcade cabinets, I highly recommend giving it a shot. It's not every day you find a Luigi-themed arcade game nowadays. So this franchise covers the home console with the GameCube, the handheld with the 3DS, we have a fun and quirky arcade machine, we have the Nintendo Land-themed attraction, we can't forget about that, and then next time, we're gonna take a look at the console handheld hybrid with Luigi's Mansion 3 on the Switch. I think Luigi's Mansion has covered a lot of bases. All we need now, take this idea, Nintendo, is Nintendogs Polterpup Edition. At that point, Luigi's Mansion will have everything. Luigi's Mansion is a pretty fascinating franchise. Every time a new one gets revealed, it comes out of nowhere. The original was hyped up to be the latest in the Mario series before showing off something entirely new. Dark Moon was revealed amidst a handful of already existing 3DS games at E3. The remake of the first game was thrown into a Nintendo Direct like it was no big deal. And then during the hype cycle for said remake, just when we were expecting new details, we got a new game instead. Luigi's Mansion 3. No subtitle for this one, huh? Yeah, that's gonna be weird for Americans. To be fair, we should have saw it coming. Luigi shooting a plunger in the Simon Belmont Smash trailer? What? Why? That doesn't make any sense. Oh, okay. Now I know Dark Moon wasn't everybody's cup of tea, but a new Luigi's Mansion game? That still really excited me. Maybe the developers were gonna listen to all the complaints that a lot of people had and give us the sequel that we all wanted. The sequel that we've been asking for years. We may be well into November at this point. I couldn't play the entire game and get a video out on the day this game released on Halloween. Thanks for that, Nintendo. But here we are anyway. It's time to take a look at Green Mario's third spooky house. Ah, this looks very peaceful. What could possibly go wrong? The story begins with a toad attempting to drive a large bus. I'm on board with this game already. Mario, Peach, and a few other toads are going on vacation, and this time they didn't forget to invite Luigi. And he even brought his dog Polterpup, so cute, easily the best thing to come out of Dark Moon. Everyone's been invited to a special hotel called the Last Resort. Oh, something's gonna go terribly wrong. Things, of course, don't seem to be quite right. Everyone has these weird faces, none of them have feet. That's a big red flag right there. And the name of the owner is Helen Gravely. That's practically an Ace Attorney name with how blatantly evil it is. But we do have this.
Oh, doggy.
Damn, this is gonna be a good game. And of course, things do go horribly wrong. It turns out that Helen is a big fan of King Boo, and she's freed him from his portrait prison. Seeking revenge once more, he manages to seal everybody in their own portraits, again, and before he manages to take one final victim, Luigi makes his escape, jumping down the laundry chute down to the basement of the hotel. Make it to the top of the hotel, and save everybody. I like this premise a lot. It gets to the point and doesn't really pretend to be any more mysterious than it is. Dark Moon slipping in these King Boo teases, acting as if his appearance is some sort of surprise, and saving the Mario being kidnapped twist until the near end of the game. It made any sort of tension feel pretty forced, in my opinion, as minor as it sounds. Here, our goal is laid out to us immediately. Now go and do some ghost busting. I know it's not technically a mansion we're exploring, it's a hotel, but hey, check this out. Luigi is canonically allergic to dust. I'm pretty sure this is character development. Soon after, with our flashlight in hand, we find an upgraded Poltergust. We get to play with Polterpup for a little bit. I love this dog to death. Ha, you get it? Death because it's dead. Deal with a few bad ghosties, regain access to the dark light, and free Egad from his portrait prison. And do you remember how the professor was so annoying in the last game? He would just call you endlessly and it was one of the game's biggest problems? Well, to make up for that, they gave him a run cycle. This is the greatest thing I have ever seen. Oh no, Grandpa's stuck again. He also gives you a Virtual Boy. Never trust anybody that gives you a Virtual Boy. And it's as good a time as any to mention just how much animation we got here. It is arguably the best part of the entire package. In the past, Egad has always said this really charming gibberish, but now his mouth moves to said gibberish, and it's really weird. Oh man, that's so weird. Whether or not you like Dark Moon, it is a safe assumption to say that the cutscenes were the best part of that game, and the attention solely given to the animation in this sequel, it's incredible. Every cutscene is just so filled with life and energy, and when we get to Gooigi, who lacks both of those things, it makes for some of the game's strongest laughs. Hey, look at this. Here's Polterpup rubbing its butt across the floor. Have I mentioned how much I love it yet? You know, Mario plus Rabbids Kingdom Battle also had a ton of really in-depth animation with its cutscenes, and just like here in Luigi's Mansion, that was some of the best parts about that game. I am so excited to see this much charm and more in future Mario games. But how about the actual act of exploring the hotel? Well, I'm happy to report, by God, they damn near fixed everything. There's only one building to explore once again, and there's no longer any instances of regularly being pulled back to Egad's lab to stop the adventure. That's all gone. I mean, okay, it happens like once or twice really early on, but after that, it's gone. Yeah, just explore until your thumbs fall off, no worries. And what's great is despite being in only one building, each floor is essentially a different stage, all having unique themes that go above and beyond anything the last game did with its multiple mansions. It does sorta stray further away from the creepy atmosphere the first game had, but I was so entertained from start to finish, I really didn't mind. If anything, I'm just kind of confused as to why some areas are as brightly lit as they are. Dark lighting within the rooms were the whole reason Luigi had a flashlight in the first place. Here though, I mean, come on man, you're just wasting batteries. Between this and leaving his TV on in Dark Moon, we can very clearly tell that he has no problem wasting money on energy. The movie set was probably my favorite of all the floors. You stumble onto a handful of blue screen sets, and looking through the camera at them totally transforms the scene. It's brilliant. As a result of the floor setup, the game takes an almost formulaic approach. The point is to constantly collect elevator buttons to move higher and higher up the hotel. And aside from these two instances where you're stopped by this dumb cat, which just feels like a whole lot of padding in my opinion, it feels like you're constantly making progress.
I'm a star.
Man, I love him so much. Each button is also held by a boss ghost. Yes, they did it. They finally did the portrait ghosts again. I love this so much, man. They all match their themed floor perfectly, and each encounter leads to a pretty interesting boss fight that requires a bit of puzzle solving. Honestly, the only thing I really miss is a bit of flavor text like we got in the first game. It didn't really add a ton, but it would have given these characters that much more personality. The only time we really got a lot of that was with Morty, a starving film director who makes a movie out of the battle that you have. And once you finish that, he flies off to edit the movie. You can stop him from fulfilling his dreams, but I just don't really have the heart to do so. Well, until the near end of the game at least. You know, he has to finish the movie at some point, give it a few hours, and then we'll go ahead and check in on our good pal Morty. It's gonna be a friendly encounter, I assure you. Oh yeah, at that point, all bets are off. I gotta get my achievements.
Oh boy, phew.
Oh yeah.
Naturally, we have to go for smaller ghosts as well. Combat has been totally changed here, and I'm really not sure if I like it or not. You fill up a meter similar to Dark Moon, but here in 3, you're then able to slam them onto the floor a handful of times, taking off a good chunk of their health. You take off the same amount every time, so there is a bit of strategy in dropping the health just enough to make one slam session take it out completely, and honestly, it is super satisfying, especially when you slam them into other ghosts. Oh, that's really nice. However, this also makes the encounters easier than ever. Half of the fun before was overcoming the struggle of the ghosts pulling away from you, and any struggle feels nearly non-existent here. And when you're in crowds, surrounded by them, sometimes they just watch you during the capturing process. What, you guys enjoying the show? At the very least, they do look better than the ones from Dark Moon. They're still occasionally a bit wacky and goofy, but it's a lot more downplayed than it was before, which is nice. We just see the standard ones in a ton of different outfits instead. I still prefer the blank stares and cackling laughs from the first game, but since we have bigger threats of the bosses now, it ends up feeling like less of an issue. And actually, if anything, it matters even less because combat takes a huge backseat to just pure exploration. And thank goodness too, any form of combat means it's possible to go into low health mode, and then the music basically mutes itself and this loud annoying beeping starts happening, and it's the worst thing I've ever heard in my life. It's 2019, how did they think this was okay? Capturing ghosts is still a major component, of course, but this game is all about taking in your surroundings and mainly just getting a ton of money. Luigi has his priorities straight, I can appreciate that. Doing basically anything here rewards you with a bunch of cash, and it's really satisfying getting it all into your vacuum. The physics in this game are pretty wild. I think the developers are just trying to show off at times. There is a shop that you can use your money in, but the options are pretty limited, so you're probably better off just hoarding all of it instead. Using a rope attached to plungers that you can shoot justifies the entire pulling and slamming mechanic. There's a brand new jumping mechanic to help you get past some obstacles that are in your way or clear out a bunch of stuff around you. The dark light is no longer time limited, which is awesome. You can also once again yell for Mario's name whenever you want.
Mario, Mario.
It's not as intense as it was in the first game, but it's still nice to see. And yes, apparently this was in Dark Moon as well, but only after you see Mario for the first time. Thank you for the dozens of people who taught me that.
Mario.
Awesome. And of course, Luigi. A shoehorned co-op mode in Mansion 3DS is now a full-fledged feature of this entire adventure. With a click of the right stick, you spawn it from its vacuum cleaner jail cell, and Luigi suddenly goes unconscious. But now you have the means to get through plenty of barriers that Luigi himself isn't able to get through. When this mechanic was initially revealed, I was actually really worried that this game was going to become a forced co-op adventure that wouldn't be all that fun in single player, but that's really not the case. Luigi is just a sort of lesser Luigi. It's sort of like how Nitro Red is to me, just a lesser equivalent, and that's fine. Since it's so easy to get Luigi in and out of action, it never ends up feeling like a bother. It's actually pretty entertaining getting Luigi to slip through grates, help Luigi get to places that he can't reach otherwise, or sacrifice him for the greater good. It's okay, Luigi is immortal, we're now stuck with it for the rest of our lives. There are even a few times where Luigi is held captive and is slowly killed, with Luigi being the only means to rescue him. That is the true hero here. And it tastes of coffee apparently, so that's something. And Luigi is usually the key to finding the floor's handful of shiny gems, 6 on each one. Dark Moon had gems as well, but they were spread across all of the missions for a single mansion, and you wouldn't really know which mission you could or couldn't get one in. It was pretty annoying. Here though, it is much more enjoyable to go for, since there's usually unique environments or puzzles tied to them. They ended up actually being a major joy to collect. You don't really get anything great for doing it, but at least getting them is a good time. Similarly, the boos return as well, acting sort of how they did in Dark Moon, though it really feels like they were just kind of thrown in just because the previous games had them. They're not really all that satisfying to find or capture. Okay, maybe capturing them is kind of fun. Getting both boos and gems are really the only reason to backtrack to floors that you've already completed, but since the gems are the only thing that feel well spaced out throughout an entire floor, no matter how crammed said floor is, the boos just feel unnecessary, honestly. And going on this conversation of comparing things to Dark Moon, the Toads return as well, once again acting like an escort mission, the few times that you do get to play with them.
It's me. Luigi.
But you're able to shoot them into glass, and they really like it, so it's okay in my book. Oh man, there's a high five button too! 10 out of 10 game mechanic. And now it's about that time where we discuss the end of the game, but since the game is newer, I don't want to spoil anything, so go ahead and jump to this time right here, and yeah, we'll go right past it. Alright, good, yeah. King Boo is at the top of the hotel. Surprise! There's a pretty simplistic battle on the roof with an easy to figure out attack pattern, and then it's kinda done in no time. It's honestly pretty underwhelming. I guess the whole idea of shooting bombs into his mouth is like a weird throwback to that King Boo fight in Mario Sunshine, but that's probably a major stretch. This is fine at best. I just hope that if we get another game, King Boo trapping people in portraits, it doesn't happen again. We get it, the king has a weird thing for framed pictures, but it's time to move on. As a result of the battle, the hotel crumbles to the ground. Luigi accepts his fate since, again, he's immortal, and just like last time, thanks to the dark light, everybody is saved. But all of the ghosts are upset to have lost their home, so Egad takes it upon himself to set up a task force to build a brand new one. And this is where all of that money that you've been collecting comes in. Yeah, just like the first game, the new building that you get is dependent on how much money you have. Pretty cool. It's also another reason why you shouldn't really buy anything in the shop. It ruins your rank. That's no good. The game doesn't really warn you ahead of time that they're gonna do the whole ranking thing again, so just take my advice. It's a pretty cute ending, not as charming as Dark Moon's, but like that game, the last thing we see is Polterpup sleeping in Luigi's lap. I have no complaints. And that wraps up Luigi's Mansion 3. There are also some multiplayer modes on top of the main adventure. Making its return is the Scare Scraper, where now up to 8 people rummage through randomly designed floors to complete a specific task, and then you keep moving up and up and up the tower until you make it to the roof for a boss fight against the returning Boolossus. Pretty cool. And this is so much better than it was in the last game, partially due to the better controls, but also because each floor has a random objective rather than a set number of pre-established ones. And there's also plenty more opportunities for legitimate cooperation. This is a whole lot of fun. You know, I didn't really expect too much after Dark Moon's mode, but this is a really good time. And then there's the brand new Scream Park, a handful of proper mini-games using some mechanics that are found in the main adventure. It's pretty entertaining. You know, it's neat to have an extra reason to pop this game in every now and then, even though minigames like this are probably the last thing I thought Luigi's Mansion needed, but fun is fun, so I'm cool with it. So yeah, Luigi's Mansion 3, damn fine game, way better than I thought it was gonna be. As for whether or not it's better than the first game, that's really hard to say. Simply speaking purely on atmosphere, Mansion 1 has still yet to be topped in my opinion. And since it's so short, I will still return to this game constantly for years to come. But man, I still loved nearly everything here in Luigi's Mansion 3. Based on variety, charm, how much fun it is to simply explore, how amazing it is to just see Luigi do anything, this game is a fantastic achievement, and I'm really excited to see what comes next from Next Level Games. Dark Moon was a fun game, don't get me wrong, but that first adventure, that was something special. And then we have Luigi's Mansion 3, which is really special as well, just in a different way. Now, if we continue down the Resident Evil timeline here, over the shoulder Luigi's Mansion next? The best part about this franchise is not only do we get a handful of really great games, but one of the strongest personalities in the entire Mario universe. Luigi is so lovable, and in my opinion, it's because of these games, and that's awesome. But we also did get a lot of clips of Luigi petting a dog, and I can appreciate that as well. Best game Nintendo's ever made.